Okay, dude, can we talk about Ariana Grande's music video for Hate That I Made You Love Me? I know, I'm like a month late to the game, but I literally cannot stop watching it. The cinematography, the storytelling, the lyrics themselves. I'm obsessed. I am obsessed. After like the third or fourth watch, I was like, okay, let's actually dive into what is making this so captivating to me. So, the next few times I watched it, I did so through a creative direction lens. I wanted to understand how we, as the viewers, are supposed to feel. What is the story that is actually being told? And how are the camera movements, the angles, the styling, the editing, and even the lyrics themselves supporting that story? Now, disclaimer, these are just my incredibly overly analytical thoughts on the matter. I do not claim to actually know the intention behind these choices, okay? Sometimes people just create something because they think it's really cool, and there aren't actually 7 layers of deeper meaning behind it, and that's okay. I personally love to search for and find the intentionality in art, especially for something as huge and collaborative as a music video, where you literally have to take a feeling and the meaning of a song and translate it into an entirely different visual language, right? So, looking over my notes, yes, I took notes. I take this shit seriously. I realized that to me there are 3 main layers to what I am calling my interpretation. 1, the visual language of the video. 2, the psychological story being told. And 3, gently exploring the larger question that it left me with of who you actually is in this song. And underneath all 3 of those, I landed on this idea. What if this video is exploring the destruction that can come from loving an idea of someone rather than actually knowing the person themselves? And even more so, maybe the most terrifying part of all of that is realizing that the person who may have caused the destruction may not even feel the same degree and magnitude of that impact. So, let's start with the visual language. Because first and foremost, the contrast in this video goes crazy for supporting this story. We have these 2 main characters that are existing in what feels like, to me, to be 2 different realities entirely. We have the man living in this distorted, chaotic, fragmented, psychological nightmare. And the further along we get in the story, the more completely unraveled he becomes. And all of that is being amplified through the camera movement, through the pacing, through the framing, the angles, basically the entire visual language of his world. First, we meet him already disheveled, looking a mess, stressed, cigarette hanging out of the side of his mouth. There is literal darkness around him. In lighting, and in actual set design. A menacing storm in the background. We see him burying something. Then we get this like crooked angle as he pats the dirt down at around like 25 seconds in, which immediately gives us this sense that something about his reality is off. Then we get these really tight close-ups of him sweating, snot running down his nose, brows furrowed. He angrily puts out a cigarette with a sense of finality that we don't quite yet understand. Because mind you, the music has not even started yet at this point in the story. His energy is setting the stage before we've even heard a single lyric. And all of that is evident in the intentional choices that were made with set, with lighting, with camera. We are being dropped into a world where something has already gone terribly wrong. And you feel that how? Because no words are being said. This is the power of visual language. And as the story progresses, he just becomes more and more and more unraveled. His experience becomes more and more and more chaotic. And eventually his entire physical world starts reflecting the psychological disaster that is happening inside of him. And then we have Ariana. And I think a very fascinating thing about her character is that she feels completely different from him in almost every single conceivable way. My favorite example of this was when he was literally on fire and she was just standing, angelically observing, watching from a distance. The framing of this scene was so genius to capture this energy, beautifully showing this contrast, the very contrast that I'm talking about. Because while he is sweaty and disheveled and frantic, literally losing his mind, she is calm. She's composed. She just kind of exists among this. Even her styling, her makeup, her hair is clean, untouched, simple, classic, beautifully fitting in with this like vintage film era that we kind of feel is the underlying inspiration and yet also frozen in time. And really, I think that that contrast is doing so much heavy lifting and telling us, the viewers, about their relationship dynamic. Because he is experiencing the absolute emotional apocalypse of this relationship. And she's just standing there, pretty and quiet and observant. Like, girl. No, but seriously, I think this video is making a really, really intentional distinction between their experiences. His reality is distorted because of what he feels. Hers is completely untouched by it. And we see this in the way that the camera treats them, too. His world is all crooked angles, tight, claustrophobic shots, chaotic movement. Everything about his existence feels unstable. If this isn't evident in the actual camera movement itself, it is in the scene that is being set before him. But when we see Ariana, there is a completely different quality to her presence, even if you can't quite put your finger on it yet. She feels almost ethereal. She is often framed in a way that makes her feel more composed, more centered, more in control, even among his chaos. And then we get this idea that she may not even be a real person in this video. And I mean that literally. There's the first moment we see of her sitting in the back seat, beautifully captured through a rear view mirror shot. I love those shots. And then she's gone. Before she magically appears in front of him, the car drives straight through her, completely untouched. She's there, but she's not really there. And I remember watching that and being like, okay, wait. Because if we're taking the lyrics and the visual storytelling together, I think this is where the idea of her being more of an idea of a person really starts to come into play. I literally wrote in my notes, she's just an idea for real. I love the filming detail. Like the lyric literally says, I can see right through. And what happens visually? She is literally see-through. Perfect timing. And then the car drives through her, and what happens? What is destroyed? Not her, the car. His world. Everything around her, and yet she's completely untouched. Such an interesting way to visualize the idea that maybe this person, this man who is our protagonist, so to speak, has built an entire emotional world around her, but she was never living inside of that world with him. Does that make sense? Track with me here. He is experiencing her as this massive, all-consuming force. She's almost like a projection, an idea, a fantasy, something that exists entirely in his perception. And to me, I think that starts to actually explain why his life is so chaotic, while she remains so calm as this distant figure. Because he's not necessarily reacting to her, right? He's reacting to the version that he's created. And that makes the line, hate that I made you love me, because I barely tried, feel so much more interesting to me. Imagine having that much power over someone's emotional reality while barely lifting a finger to do it. And then the car literally explodes on the words barely tried. Like car bouncing to the actual lyrics, amplifying their potency, amplifying this contrast where she barely tried, but his car, his world is what's fucked. Like, I'm sorry, but that in and of itself is such a good visual joke. She says I barely tried, his life goes up in flames. And that to me is really what the emotional heart of the video is. That contrast. To me, I don't think the video is saying that she's cruel or that she is intentionally trying to destroy his world. I actually think it's something a lot more uncomfortable than that. I think it's asking us to consider what happens when you unintentionally have the power to completely alter someone's life without ever actually realizing how much power you had over them. And that's where I start thinking about the composition notebooks, one of my favorite storytelling details in this whole video. Because we see all of these damn notebooks in this dingy-ass bunker. The physical representation of the memories and everything that he's associated with this relationship, buried underground, attempting to hide from it, avoid it. And then later, if you noticed, we see a single composition notebook in a box of the things that he is gathering in the home to burn and destroy. Then we even see Ariana in this bunker reading the notebooks. To me, they look like notes about herself. I even explored this idea that the character that we see of hers in this video is really just the personification of whatever is in these notebooks. Because the lyric says, "You studied my crown and you borrowed my body." Ugh. I know her vocals eat down, and that's one of the main things that she is known for, but can we take a moment for her lyricism? She says, "You studied my crown and you borrowed my body. You studied me. You took notes. You observed me. You created this entire understanding of who I am." And then we see Ariana reading these notes like it's her very first time doing so, and as she does so, she progressively gets more upset. And I was like, okay, wait, what does she discover here? Because if these are his notes about her, what exactly has he written down? What version of her exists in these pages? When you zoom in and actually look at the notebooks themselves, the words that are written, the images that are scratched into it, to me, they feel dark. They don't necessarily feel like a glamorous representation of who she is. So what version of her exists in these pages? Is it the version of her that he's created in his mind that is destroying him? Or does he feel destroyed by an actual person? Because does she even recognize herself in the person that he's describing in these notebooks? Under the assumption that those notebooks really were intended to be a representation of notes about her, right? Or is she reading these and realizing that the person that he's been obsessed with this entire time isn't even her at all? I even thought that it was really interesting that while she was reading some of the notebooks, the camera angles themselves were crooked, like she was seeing into his world, his perspective. But this idea that he is obsessed with a projected image is visually played on once we get to the diner. Because suddenly Ariana isn't just one person popping up everywhere. She's the waitress, she's the customer, she's the cook. She is all of these different people occupying the exact same space. The whole diner itself feels like a miniature world. It actually was a handmade toy set. Yeah, handmade toy set. So it literally is a toy set being utilized to capture this particular scene. Why? To me, I think it's reinforcing this idea that we aren't watching actual reality. We are watching his reality, his perception, his imagination. Because if you are so obsessed with someone that you just start seeing them everywhere, then of course your entire world is going to be consumed by them. And I love the way that the camera plays with that. Even the little details like the drawn-on mustache. Did you notice that part? It feels almost intentionally theatrical and artificial. We're watching Ariana play all of these different versions of the same person. And the whole thing feels like we're in some sort of psychological play that he created. Side note, I also watched how this scene was filmed. Dude, the timing, the costumes, the amount of takes required for the proper composition. It's an art form, friends. It is an art form. And then, right after we see him fall when he sees the waitress as Ariana, we get that off-kilter camera angle again, which I love, because it's almost like the camera is physically going, yeah, no, this guy is not okay. His entire perception is literally off axis. And the more I watched this, the more I started to wonder if that's the real story that we're watching. That this isn't the story of a woman destroying a man. It's a story about a man destroying himself through the version of a woman that he created in his mind. And that is where the whole thing gets really interesting to me. Because then I start playing around with this question. Who is the actual you being sung about in this song? And I don't mean a specific person. I'm not here trying to nitpick what specific relationship she might be referring to. I'm talking about the greater you. Is she telling the story of one man who fell in love? Or is the man playing the personification of anyone who has ever fallen in love with the idea of Ariana? And I don't mean that in a creepy way. I mean that in the very strange, unique, complicated way that being a celebrity in a curated world can often bring. Because Ariana is someone whose life is always under observation. People study her. They take notes on her. They analyze her relationship, her appearances, her music, her personality, the way she speaks, the way she dresses. People build entire ideas off of who she is based on the pieces of herself that she puts out into the world. And then suddenly the lyric, "You studied my crown and borrowed my body," feels really interesting coming from her. Because what does it mean to study someone's crown? Are we referring to just their mind, their crown chakra? Or is it the image, the status, the persona? Studied my crown, the version of them that exists publicly. And then to borrow their body, to think that you know them, to create a version of them that exists entirely in your head. When you are a fan of a celebrity, a musician, whoever, even if they do share a lot of themselves publicly, you do not know them. And how often she deals with people who think they do, just because they watch her movies, they watch her videos. You studied my crown and borrowed my body. Borrowed. I didn't give it to you. I think the video is really playing on this idea visually, because Ariana is constantly being presented as both a person and a projection. We saw in their home, there were real photos. It was a real relationship that it feels like it's referring to. But that's where the visual language and the choice of storytelling can have so many layers. You know, she's physically there, obviously, but she's see-through, she's duplicated, she's everywhere. She appears in these little theatrical worlds that feel like they're being constructed by someone else. If that doesn't describe the actual relationship of being a celebrity in Hollywood, a curated world. And meanwhile, the person who is obsessed with her is the one whose reality is really falling apart. We see that he had been documenting her, even if it was just symbolic and explored visually. He studied her. Now he's seeing her everywhere. He's trying to burn her out of his life, trying to bury her. And then, arguably one of the most important storytelling choices, at the very end, he goes back to dig it all up again. Why? Why, after spending the entire video trying to destroy and bury everything connected to her, would you go back and dig it up? What? And I think the answer is that you can't really bury something that you created yourself. You can burn photographs, you can destroy notes, you can throw away objects, you can even literally burn the evidence, but you can't erase the version of someone that you've built in your mind. Until you truly process and move through it, it can literally bury you alive. The cinematic choice to have the video end with her with the shovel, burying him, captured, by the way, with the very same angle that we saw in the beginning when he was in that position. So perfect of a choice to end it that way, creating this continuity, especially if we know that the person burying him isn't even a real person. It's his own emotional world collapsing in, leaving him in that dingy-ass bunker with everything that he tried to forget. Incredible. Incredibly done. No notes. Now, we can't talk about all of these incredible visual and storytelling elements without talking about one of the main brilliant minds behind it. The director, Christian Breslauer, who, by the way, is quickly becoming one of my absolute favorite music video directors. He is the guy behind some of our iconic favorites. But to be honest, it's this video really actually started to make me realize how much I love Christian Breslauer's directing style. Because the more of his work that I watch, the more that I notice this recurring thing where he doesn't just visually illustrate a song. He takes the emotional experience of the song and turns it into an entire physical world. And I think that that is exactly what we are seeing here. The lyrics are telling us one story, but then the cinematography, the editing, the camera movement, the production design, the acting, even the fact that they cast an actual actor. It wasn't just a music video extra. It was somebody that is known in film. They are all having this completely different conversation with the song, adding layers to its meaning. Like the line, "I barely tried," becoming the car literally exploding. "See right through" in the lyrics becoming Ariana literally being see-through. Actually being physically transparent. A person being obsessed with someone becomes them seeing this person everywhere, visually. And heartbreak itself becomes an entire world that is burning down around you. I think that's really what I love so much about his work, and by extension, this video, because to me, it doesn't seem like he's just asking, how do I make this song look good? To me, it feels like he is asking if this song were a movie, what would it actually feel like to live inside of it? And I think that that is a really fascinating approach to any kind of direction, creative direction or otherwise. Now, I haven't watched his entire catalog, so I can't pretend to be the master on all things Christian Breslauer, but I have started to notice some really interesting patterns that now has me wanting to go down an entire rabbit hole and do an entire video just dedicated to understanding and interpreting his visual style, because I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of things that I love and a lot of things that it's teaching me about how I want to embody my future work. But right now we are focused on Ariana. And the thing that I love the most about this video isn't that I've necessarily figured out everything about what it's saying. It's that every single time that I watch it, and I've watched it a lot, I find yet another choice that makes me start to question the story all over again. And I think that that is a fantastic sign of a really good visual world. Not that it's telling you what to think, not that the interpretation is obvious, so to speak, but that it gives you enough to keep thinking about it long after it was over. And one thing I will do is think about the meaning of a damn good music video. All right, friends, until next time.